The rain hit S7 like a reprimand. Not the water itself. S7 had processed the data on Earth precipitation, had understood it intellectually as a function of the planet's water cycle, had even seen simulations of it during the diplomatic briefing on Vreth Station. But the sound of it, the way it struck the landing pad in 10,000 simultaneous tiny impacts, each one a separate electromagnetic pulse against S7's skin, the whole of it arriving as something between a roar and a hiss that had no equivalent in any Vrethian sensory vocabulary. S7 stood at the top of the shuttle ramp and did not move. Behind them, the rest of the delegation waited with the particular patience of beings who were also, quietly, terrified. The facility sat at the edge of a gray-green cliff. Below it, something vast and dark was moving. The ocean. S7 registered the actual ocean, not a contained body of water but an entire planetary feature just asterisk sitting there, doing whatever it wanted. The electromagnetic noise coming off it was extraordinary. S7's skin read the salt content in the air, the pressure differential, the distant flicker of lightning somewhere over the water, and several thousand birds doing complicated things in the updrafts, and somewhere beneath all of it, a low, persistent hum that might have been the planet itself. A human was walking toward them across the landing pad. She was not running, which S7 found remarkable given the conditions. She was holding a small dome of fabric above her head on a thin metal spoke, a device S7's briefing notes supplied helpfully, called an umbrella, used to redirect precipitation, and she was walking through the rain as though the rain were not doing what it was doing, which was asterisk everything asterisk, all at once, very loudly. She stopped at the base of the ramp and looked up at S7 with an expression the briefing notes identified as a smile. "Welcome to Scotland," she said. "I'm Wren. I run the botanical exchange program here." She glanced up at the sky with the easy familiarity of someone checking on a neighbor. "Sorry about the weather. It'll do this for a bit and then stop, probably." S7 descended the ramp. Each step brought more of the electromagnetic chaos into range, the rain on the metal, the wind doing something to the cliff edge that produced a low moan S7 felt in their secondary joints, the sheer density of asterisk life radiating from the soil beyond the facility fence. Earth's biosphere pressed against S7's senses like a crowd. "How," S7 said and paused because the question had several valid endings. "How do you filter it? How do you move through it? How do you think? How do you survive the noise?" Wren tilted her head. Behind her, the ocean did something dramatic. "What noise?" she said. The suit breach happened on the second morning. Delegate Thune, the youngest of the Vrethian party, here as a cultural observer and deeply regretting it, caught the wrist seal of their environmental suit on the corner of a specimen shelf in Wren's receiving lab. It was a small tear, a centimeter, maybe less. But the breach alarm in Thune's suit was not small, and neither was the sound Thune made, and neither was the speed at which the rest of the delegation moved to the far end of the room. Earth's microbial density was, by galactic cooperative standards, aggressively inadvisable. Every surface in this facility hosted more living organisms per square centimeter than most planets managed per square kilometer. The briefing had been very thorough on this point. Wren crossed the room in 4 steps, looked at the tear and laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. S7, watching from the doorway, had learned enough about human facial expressions by then to identify it as the laugh that men I've seen worse before breakfast. Wren was already opening a cabinet, already pulling out a small case, already sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of Thune with a focused expression and a patch kit. "Hold still," she said. "Left wrist right, good, this'll take a minute." Thune held very still. The rest of the delegation watched Wren work with the particular attention of beings who were calculating risk. S7 watched Wren's hands, the efficiency of them, the lack of any visible hesitation. She pressed the patch against the seal, ran a small heated tool along the edge, checked the integrity with a gauge she produced from her jacket pocket, checked it again, and sat back. "Done," she said. She looked up at Thune. "You okay? That probably gave you a scare." Thune's harmonics were still in the register that indicated elevated stress. Wren read this somehow, not, as Sevek suspected, because she understood Vrethian vocal physiology, but because she was paying the kind of attention that didn't require a briefing document. She stood up, went to a counter, and came back with a small round object on a ceramic plate. "Biscuit," she said to Thune. "They're oat. I made them this morning. You can't eat them obviously, but—" She set the plate down on the nearest shelf within Thune's line of sight. "Sometimes it helps just to have something offered, I find." Thune looked at the biscuit, then at Wren. Their harmonics shifted, very slightly, toward the register that indicated something more complicated than fear. Sevek opened their recording function and noted, "The human did not ask if the delegate was important before helping. She did not ask anything. She simply helped, and then she offered food, and the food was not edible, and she knew this, and she offered it anyway." Sevek was not sure what category to file this under. They left the field blank and kept watching. Outside, it had started raining again. The storm arrived in the late afternoon, with the kind of confidence that suggested it had not been asked for permission. Wren had been leading them through the greenhouse, an enormous glass structure bolted onto the south side of the facility, filled with what she called a working collection, and what Sevek's atmospheric sensors called asterisk and ecological improbability. Species from 6 of Earth's continental regions grew within arm's reach of each other, their root systems apparently coexisting in the same soil, their canopies overlapping, their biochemical outputs mingling in ways that should, by every model Sevek had encountered, have resulted in competitive exclusion and mass die-off. Instead, everything was thriving. This one, Wren touched a broad-leafed plant with dark stems, is from a rainforest in Central Africa. This one next to it is from a semi-arid region in northern Mexico. They have almost nothing in common in terms of what they need. She paused. Except that they both respond well to having neighbors. So, they should not grow together, Sevek said. They shouldn't, no. Wren sounded fond rather than troubled by this, but they do. The lights went out. Not gradually, all at once, the facility's external power failing as the storm hit the clifftop with its full attention. The greenhouse went dark except for the gray-green light coming through the glass, which was now being struck by rain hard enough to produce a sound like sustained applause. The delegation froze. Wren did not freeze. Wren said, "Ah, there it is," in a tone of mild confirmation, and produced a light from her jacket pocket and said, "Follow me, stay close, watch the irrigation lines on the floor, they're a trip hazard," and moved. Sevek followed. The rest of the delegation followed Sevek. They moved through the dark greenhouse in a line, Wren's light bobbing ahead of them, her free hand occasionally reaching back to steady a delegate who stumbled or trailing along a shelf edge to confirm their position. She navigated by touch and by some spatial knowledge that lived in her body rather than her mind. Sevek could see it in how she moved, unhesitating, not performing confidence but simply having it, the way a being has it when a place belongs to them. They reached the storm shelter at the facility's interior core. Wren got the generator running in 6 minutes. The lights came back on. Sevek looked around at the delegation. Every one of them was broadcasting stress harmonics. Wren was checking the generator's fuel level with a small flashlight held between her teeth. When the greenhouse power was restored and they had made their way back, Wren stopped beside a low plant bearing small red fruit. She picked one, held it up, looked at it with an expression Sevek had begun to think of as her scientific affection expression. "Tomato," she said. "This particular cultivar took about 10,000 years of human intervention to exist. We cross-pollinated wild species that were mildly toxic, selected for the ones that were less likely to kill us, kept doing that across hundreds of generations. She turned the fruit in her fingers. It shouldn't exist, technically. We made it exist. She held it out to Sevek. Sevek took it carefully. It was warm from the grow lights. It had the electromagnetic signature of something alive, recently separated from its source. It smelled, Sevek's sensors reported, like something between sweetness and acid. Sevek held it like it might bite. This turned out to be the correct instinct. Sevek did not sleep the way humans slept. They entered a reduced consciousness state that served similar neural functions, but it was shallow, and they surfaced from it easily. And in the gray pre-dawn of the fourth morning, they surfaced to find their atmospheric processor running a fault cycle. They ran the diagnostic twice. The result was the same both times. A filter membrane had degraded, incompatible with Earth's particular combination of particulates. Apparently, a scenario the engineering team had called *unlikely. The suit could maintain safe atmospheric filtration for approximately 140 minutes. The return shuttle was 43 minutes away. Sevek sent the recall signal, confirmed receipt, and went to find Ren. She was in the garden. Not the greenhouse, the actual outdoor garden, the one that existed in the open air of Earth, unfenced, unfiltered, directly connected to the biosphere. She was crouched beside a low bed of plants Sevek didn't recognize, and she was talking to them in a low voice, and her hands were in the soil up to the wrist. She looked up when she heard Sevek's approach, read something in the way Sevek was standing. "What's wrong?" she said, no preamble. Sevek told her, all of it, the filter failure, the timeline, the shuttle. Ren stood up. Soil fell from her hands. She looked at Sevek for exactly 2 seconds with an expression of focused calculation, and then she said, "Okay, come with me," and walked back toward the greenhouse at a pace that was not quite running but that covered ground efficiently. What followed was difficult for Sevek to fully process in real time. Ren moved through the greenhouse talking continuously, not to Sevek exactly, more asterisk around asterisk them, narrating her own thinking. She pulled a filtration unit from the wall of the greenhouse, the kind used for regulating atmospheric composition around sensitive species. She connected it to a portable oxygen canister from the emergency supply locker. She looked at the connector fitting between the two and said, "That's not going to mate with your suit intake, is it?" And answered her own question by retrieving a length of flexible hose and a coupling adapter from a drawer that she clearly knew by feel, not by sight. "Hold this," she said, and Sevek held things and passed things, and tried to follow what was happening, which was Ren building a functional atmospheric filtration bridge between greenhouse equipment and Vrethian suit technology in approximately 14 minutes using components that had never been designed to interact. She ran a test cycle. It worked. "Okay," she said. She connected the assembly to Sevek's suit intake. "That'll carry you until the shuttle gets here. Don't move around too much, the hose length is limited." She looked up. "You all right?" Sevek processed the question. Their suit was now functioning. They were breathing filtered air. The crisis had been resolved using a greenhouse humidifier, an oxygen canister, and a length of irrigation hose. "I am," Sevek said. "Yes." They sat on the low wall at the edge of the garden bed and waited for the shuttle. Ren sat beside them, at what Sevek had come to recognize as her particular human distance, close enough to signal presence, far enough to not assume. After a while, Sevek said, "Earlier, you were speaking to the plants." Ren said, "The literature on Earth horticulture suggests this may affect plant growth rates. There's some evidence for it." She glanced at the bed she'd been tending. "I don't know if they understand. Probably they don't, not the way we mean understand. But I grew up doing it, my grandmother did it. She said plants need to know someone's paying attention." She was quiet for a moment. "I think maybe everything does." Sevek considered this. Considered the tomato they had held the night before. warm and alive in their hands. Considered Thune and the biscuit that couldn't be eaten. Considered Wren navigating the dark greenhouse by memory and touch, one hand occasionally reaching back. The shuttle appeared at the cliff edge, dropping through the gray morning clouds. Sevek stood. Wren stood with them and walked with them to the landing pad and waited while the boarding ramp descended. She did not make a speech. She didn't say it was an honor or we hope this strengthens diplomatic ties. She said safe travels, and then, because a delegation member's bag strap had caught on the ramp rail, she stepped forward and freed it without being asked. Sevek boarded last. At the top of the ramp they turned and looked back. Wren was already returning to the garden. The morning was cold enough that her breath showed, small white clouds appearing and dissolving as she walked. She crouched beside the low bed, and her hands went back into the soil, and she said something to whatever was growing there, too far now for Sevek to hear. The ramp closed. Sevek found their seat and opened their recording file and looked at the blank category field from 2 days ago, the one where they had not known what to call what they had seen. They thought about what they had observed on this world, the electromagnetic chaos of the rain, the plants that should not coexist and were thriving, the jury-rigged filtration assembly that should not have worked and did, the biscuit offered to someone who could not eat it, the hands in the soil before dawn, tending something, talking to it, on the grounds that everything needs to know someone is paying attention. Sevek typed into the field, belonging extended. Then they looked out the viewport as Earth fell away beneath them, gray-green and cloud-wrapped and impossible, a world that had spent 4 billion years finding increasingly creative ways to be alive, and felt something they did not have a Vrethian word for either. They left that field blank too. Some things they were learning were better held than named.